Now, all right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to continue our discussion about the age of exploration by talking about the 13 English colonies, okay? Kind of talk about when England does come in and France, of course, comes in and starts to kind of find and secure land for themselves, okay? Now, of course, at first, this is going to be come into conflict directly with Spain, who, as we had kind of mentioned yesterday, believed that they were entitled to all this territory. But of course, they couldn't really stop this invasion by the English and the French. Okay, so we'll get into this today. So let's get the PowerPoint up and we'll get rolling. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, yesterday we talked about the Spanish conquest of the Americas, okay, and we had talked about how because of this imaginary line. Let's remember, Spain and Portugal had kind of claimed some of the lands over here first, and of course, at this time, Spain, or they believe that they only really had this chain of islands here in the Caribbean, and of course, Portugal knew they had some kind of an island or land down here in present-day Brazil, but they had no concept of how big this territory was. So, of course, according to Spain and Brazil, they went to the wisest person they could think of, and that would be the Pope, to make a decision on who should take all this land. Okay, now, of course, remember, the Pope did not have authority to do this at all, but according to Spain and Portugal, who were Catholic countries, the Pope is that one step below God. So if the Pope says it, it might as well be God saying that you can do this. Okay, so because of this, the Pope is going to say, yeah, we'll draw this imaginary line right through here. Everything to the west of that line, Spain may have. Everything to the east of that line, Portugal may have. Now, the reason why I bring that up, and we're really kind of emphasizing that, is because, again, this is going to give Spain its justification about why it does the things it does, why it treats the natives so poorly, why it commits this genocide, why it takes all these natural resources and becomes this wealthy country, because they believe that they are justified by God to do this. Okay, so let's kind of remember that and keep that in mind. Now, when we did leave off yesterday, the Spanish Empire is going to be the largest empire in the world. Okay, where you see that yes, they spy and secure and take all this territory down through here. They also have little rest stops or little stops here along Africa. Okay, we also see that because of the voyage of Magellan, they're going to go ahead and say, yeah, we're going to claim the Philippines as well. Okay, so all of this is a part of Spain at this point, and yes, Spain becomes the most wealthy country in the world. Spain becomes probably one of the most powerful countries in the world as a result of this. Okay, now let's remember, and I really want to kind of drive this point home about why Spain became so wealthy. Okay, and I kind of made the example yesterday, but I want to kind of piggyback on top of this example. Let's remember, and again, like we talked about when it comes to wealth and money and gold and things like that, that gold is limited. There's not an unlimited amount of wealth and gold in the world. And by the way, I forgot to mention it. Let's get rid of our headphones. Let's get rid of our cell phones, all that stuff. Anyway, there's not an unlimited amount of money in the world. There isn't. That's what makes it rare. That's what allows it to be our currency, the whole thing. So our example yesterday, when I said, let's take $100 in $1 bills, and if I sit it right here on this projector, and then I tell the class, and let's say every one of y'all represents a different country, whoever wants that money can have it. Well, remember, there are ways where countries can try and get that money. They could go to war with each other. Like we said yesterday, you could come up and punch somebody in the nose and try to take the money. Okay, that's one way that they try to get money from each other. They may try trade. They may say, hey, I've got this water bottle and I would sell you this water bottle for $1. So you try to sell and take that money. Okay, so those are ways that countries try to get and secure this money. Now, the third way that countries try to secure money is literally by mining it out of the ground. So if you find a gold mine or a silver mine or things like that that's in your territory, you can literally mine that gold out, and now you have wealth that nobody had before. So let's think about our example yesterday where everybody's fighting over this $100 bill. Well, Spain might as well have found $500 over here, which dwarfs that money that everybody else is fighting over. Now they've got all this money from gold, silver, natural resources, goods from the New World, the Columbian exchange we talked about. All this stuff is going to just make a giant load of cash fall into Spain's lap. Okay. Now, as we had talked about yesterday, though, and again, this is a preview moving forward into when we come back from Christmas, but yes, Spain will not stay this super wealthy, rich country for very long. Okay. They will fall very quickly because their infrastructure was so messed up. They had alienated majority of their middle class because they were Muslims or non-Catholics. Okay. And so because of this, Spain can't really spend money in their own country. And so because of this, they start spending money in France and they start spending money in England. And so this wealth, this money, all this stuff that came from the New World filters through Spain and makes England and France extremely wealthy. So like I said, preview-wise, but when we come back and we start talking about the age of absolutism, and we start talking about King Louis XIV and King Louis XV and King Louis XVI, or that Henry VIII that we talked about in England, and we talked about all the people who came after Henry VIII, these people are going to be wealthy beyond imagine, because not from something they did, not because their country had taken all this wealth in, it's because all this money from the New World had filtered into them and made them extremely wealthy. Okay, so again, keep all that stuff in mind. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and move into today's stuff. Now what we're going to see is, of course, France and England are not going to just sit by and allow Spain to take all this land and get all these resources and make all this wealth. So very quickly, we see, and we kind of left with this yesterday, but again, it's a preview, it's a review from yesterday. But we're going to see that, yes, England is going to come in and land here on the east coast of America. And they're going to claim all the land along this east coast, okay, all the way down to Florida that Spain had claimed at this point. They will also have their own explorer. His name is Henry Hudson, who goes north into this thing that they will call Hudson Bay. And he will claim all the land around that Hudson Bay. Now, we talked yesterday about how this French explorer, his name was La Salle, he is going to sail in through what's called the St. Lawrence River into present-day Montreal and Quebec. Now there, he's going to hear this legend from these Native Americans that there's an all-water route that can get you all the way out to the West Coast. Now, of course, is that true? No, it's not true. There is no water route that can get you to the West Coast. But these natives probably didn't know better. What they were probably more appropriately talking about was the Mississippi River, because La Salle goes out looking for this Northwest Passage, as they call it, this Northwest Passage, to make it all the way out to the West Coast. And what he does is he's going to hop on the Mississippi River and he's going to follow it all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico. And so what's going to happen is, they'll found the city of New Orleans, which will become an extremely important city. Think of how Constantinople was to Europe. New Orleans is going to be like this for the Gulf and the southern portion of America. But what La Salle is going to do is he says, okay, I'm going to claim all the lands that this river flows into for France. So that's how France takes all this area in yellow here, because that's where all the Mississippi River flowed to. Okay, so of course they're going to call this land Louisiana after King Louis, that we'll talk about here when we come back from Christmas. Okay, so now Spain is going to come out and say, well, God said we are in charge of this land. God said this is all ours. What are you doing? Well, England and France at this point are like, look, we're going to go ahead and take this land because God said we can have it, right? And you probably don't want to go to war right now. Things are going good for you, Spain. We all can take a piece of this pie. It doesn't have to all be yours. So they kind of move in, of course, against Spain's wishes. Spain is dealing with enough in the southern portion and with all the natives and everything down in South America that Spain at this point just kind of lets them move in and take these territories. Okay. Now, we see, of course, we talked about New France, or what will eventually be called the Louisiana Territory, right through there. Now they will have. Now, of course, France will also have some disputed land right here where it's kind of partially, or depending on who you talk to, it can either be French, it can be English, whatnot. But what I want you to see by looking at this map right here is that, yes, France and England are going to be right next to each other, just like they are in Europe. And we had mentioned this before that, yeah, France and England are not going to like each other. They are going to be rivals. And even though they're over here kind of claiming lands and taking this and that, they are still going to be rivals, okay? Now, let's remember, I want to write these things down so we can remember them. Yesterday, we talked about the motivations for the Spanish, about why the Spanish came over and took all this land, okay? Real simple. So when it came to Spain, okay, and they came over to America, they came over for three things and three things only. Okay, these are three motivations. We talked about this already. The first is going to be money. Okay, obviously, everybody, I mean, the majority of white people do just about anything is for wealth, is for money, is to become rich. And we talked about, yeah, Spain will become the richest country in the world because of this. So obviously, that's a major motivation. The second one is going to be land. Now, the reason with land, or why we see that as a big motivation, is that Spain, let's think about it. It's this relatively to the rest of the world, small country in Europe. Now they've expanded their land huge. They've become this huge empire. So they look impressive. They look strong. They look fierce. So land is going to be the second major motivating factor for Spain. Now, the third motivating factor for Spain is going to be Christianity. So I'm going to say the church. And what I mean by that is that a big thing that Spain wanted to do was they wanted to convert the natives to Catholicism. That's going to be huge. And again, the point we made yesterday, that a lot of these early Spanish civilizations weren't these big thriving cities and towns and civilizations. A lot of the early Spanish little settlements were missions. They were basically a church with like a fort walls around it to protect it from anybody that wants to attack it. And what they did was they went out into the areas, they tried to convert the natives, and of course, went from there. So these little church communities called missions were really kind of the backbone of a lot of these communities. And like we mentioned, we are literally in a town that was originally a mission, down where the Alamo is and where those other little missions are, like Mission San Jose and so forth, that are on the south side of our town. Those missions were kind of what originated San Antonio, and that were these Spanish settlements where they were trying to spread Catholicism. So those were the big motivating factors for Spain. Now, moving into France. Okay. Now the French come in, and of course, they'll take some land, but really, yeah, I mean, we can put the land in here and say, yeah, they took over territory. But the big thing that the French wanted to do, just like the Spanish, was money. Now, you might say, well, how is that any different than Spain? Well, here's the deal about the French. They came in, yeah, there's natural resources here, but one of the big things that France does is they come into the natives. They don't come in and enslave. They don't come in and conquer like we saw with the Spanish. They don't come in and say, yeah, we're taking this land and we're moving in people here. They literally come in and say, hey, here are these things we have from France. We would like to trade you for what you have. So the French literally were there to trade. They were there to make deals, to make money, to kind of help everybody out. So in fact, because their motivating factor was money, many of the Native Americans, the first European language that they are going to learn is going to be French, because they learn very quickly that if that dude speaks French, they're not here to conquer you. They're not here to kill you. They're not here to take over your lands. They're here to trade. They're here to get things. So they learn very quickly to trust the French over any other European country that's out there. So later on, you might have heard of this war that we'll talk about later on called the French Indian War. It's because the Indians, a lot of the natives, they are going to side with the French. They are going to ally with the French against the English because they see them as being trustworthy as opposed to the English. Now, speaking of the English, okay, I'll put this down here. England, just like France and Spain, their first major motivating factor, of course, will be money. Their second motivating factor, just like the other two, is going to be land. But their third motivating factor is going to be different. They don't really care much about converting everybody to Christianity. What they care about is what's known as colonization. Okay? Colonization. Now, what colonization means is that we are going to be moving people here to live. We're going to be moving in families. We're going to be moving in farmers and homesteaders. We're going to build homes and build forts and build cities and actually make permanent residents here in the New World. Now, in order to do that, you've got to push those natives off that land. You've got to come in and start building homes and make forts and defend yourself if you get attacked. So yes, there's going to be a lot of factor of tension between the Native Americans and the English when they come in to set up these colonies, because, again, the natives don't want to get pushed off their land. The English want to take it, and they don't want to give that land to anybody else. So this immediately starts conflict between them. So colonization, big motivating factor for the English, why things are going to be different. So, of course, we see here that these colonies did not just form overnight. It wasn't like the English said, yes, we want colonies, and poof, colonies pop up out of the ground. That's not what took place. What's going to happen is that the English are going to attempt to set up a series of colonies. And guess what? These colonies are going to fail, going to fail, going to fail, going to fail. And let me tell you why. You would sail these people over to the Americas, okay? And guess what? Coming to America was not a cheap thing. It cost a lot of money, okay? And the problem with coming to America is that a lot of people that did come, they weren't, they were kind of ignorant. They were kind of like these spoiled rich guys that thought they were going to just come over and make a bunch of money and go back to England, okay? They were not ready to build a house and hunt for their food and grow crops and do things like that to live. So we see that a lot of these ships would sail across the ocean for 2.5 or 3 months. They would set up a fort that looked very similar to what you see right here. They would get them all ready to go, get them on their feet. Those boats would sail back to England for 2.5 or 3 months or so. They would stay there for maybe 2.5 or 3 more months to load up with supplies, and then they would come back 9 months later, or they would 9 months after they had left these people. Well, the problem is they would come back to these settlements, and they would see the settlements would be completely devastated. The settlements would be burnt down, destroyed. They could see evidence of attacks by Native Americans. They see evidence of people that just simply died of disease, or maybe they killed each other or lost their minds. So we see that, yeah, these colonies are pretty much gone. I mean, this would be the same thing as us loading up a bunch of colonists and going trying to settle on the moon, and then flying back to Earth, and then going back to the moon and seeing the whole colony is gone, is destroyed. Okay, so these things were not just automatic setup. Everything was good. Okay, now there will be one colony in particular, and again, this is kind of one of those history mysteries. That's called the Lost Colony of Roanoke. Okay, and in Roanoke, Virginia, they will set up a colony there. And again, like I just mentioned to you, they will set the colony up. Everything's going to get rocking and rolling. Everything looks good. But all of a sudden, when the ships leave and come back 6, 7 months later, the colony is gone. Like the people are gone. Now, before you come back, you might see burnt down buildings or arrows or evidence of a battle or struggle or whatnot. The colony literally looks exactly like it did when the boats left. It's just no people. There's no evidence of people. There's nowhere where they left or where they went. Nobody knows what happened to the lost colony of Roanoke. Now, of course, you get your theories out there. I mean, some people believe like alien abduction and ghosts and monsters and like all these crazy stories throughout history. More than likely what happened is when the lost colony of Roanoke got rocking and rolling, they realized that they had kind of bit off more than they can chew. And a lot of people believe that they went out and basically lived amongst the natives of the area, because later on in history, they will find some of these natives of the area that will have more European features to them. So maybe lighter hair or lighter skin or lighter eyes than what the natives had in the area. And they think, okay, well, these people went to live amongst the natives and then just kind of got lost to time, okay? Now, all of this was a big mess until the very first permanent English settlement is going to be achieved in the New World, okay? And this is going to be right here, what you see on this picture right here, is going to be a settlement known as Jamestown. Now, if you took U.S. history when you were in middle school, this is probably one of the first things y'all talked about during the course of the year, was the establishment of Jamestown. Now, this is going to happen in 1607. Am I going to ask you to remember that date? No. But back in the day when we had and taught U.S. history, that was a date we had to remember, was that in 1607, Jamestown will be founded. Okay. Now, what's going to make Jamestown be set apart from the other colonies that are going to fail? Well, Jamestown, trust me, was on its way to fail. Jamestown was not in a good spot. In fact, people were dying of disease, native attacks, the whole thing. We even see that in Jamestown, they start losing their mind where they start like executing people of Jamestown just for random things and random offenses. We even see that there are some cases of possible cannibalism in Jamestown because they were so hungry and so desperate that they were killing people to eat. I mean, crazy, crazy stuff, right? Well, what's going to happen is that the local natives of the area are going to come in, and of course the people of Jamestown, and this one man in particular named John Smith, is going to basically make good relations with the natives of the area. Now, these natives, okay, they're gonna help them out. They're gonna give them a little food. They're gonna kind of boost them along. But from these natives, Jamestown, the people of Jamestown are gonna learn how to raise a certain crop. Okay. Now, this crop that they're gonna raise is gonna be referred to or known as a cash crop. And what I mean by a cash crop is this: it is not a crop you're raising to eat, to survive on. It's a crop that you're raising purely to sell. Okay, because this crop becomes profitable. So think about cotton, like people that raise cotton. You don't get cotton balls and eat cotton balls and live off of cotton balls. You raise cotton to sell. And of course, they make the cotton into t-shirts and blankets and you name it. Okay, well, the cash crop that they're going to learn how to grow here in Jamestown is going to be tobacco. And understand, 100%, tobacco is going to be the reason why Jamestown is going to survive. Now, you might think, and of course, now we look at in the lens of 2022, and we're like, oh, tobacco. Oh, there's so many negative things about tobacco. Well, understand, back at this time, this tobacco that was grown here in Virginia, in this soil, in this climate, could only be found in this part of the world. Nowhere else in the world could grow tobacco like they could grow here. Okay? And so when these supply ships come back and they load up these tobacco and say, hey, try this out in Europe, see what everybody thinks. Well, they go over to Europe, they start smoking this tobacco, and I mean, people go gaga for it. They will pay top dollar for this tobacco. So now these colonies have become a money-making industry, okay? People start flooding money into sponsoring the building of these colonies, okay? They refer to it as a joint stock company, where people start investing money and this company starts a colony. Think of it this way. Let's say that we decided that we're going to go put a colony on the moon, and the United States doesn't put on a colony, or Russia doesn't put a colony, or China doesn't. Amazon says we're going to build a colony on the moon, or like Elon Musk says, yeah, we're going to do SpaceX, we're going to put a colony on Mars. And it's funded by a company rather than being funded by a country. Well, that's what these joint stock companies are going to do. People are going to invest money, and they are going to start these tobacco farms and tobacco colonies. And before you know it, they start bringing in a tremendous amount of money. Okay, so much like we talked about the gold and the silver and the raw materials. Well, here tobacco becomes highly profitable, and so because of this, we will see very quickly. Well, of course, this shows, John Smith kind of going in to these natives, them teaching him, giving him food, kind of helping out Jamestown, and of course, teaching them how to raise tobacco, okay, and how to cultivate tobacco. Now, very quickly, we see that the English settlements are going to pop up all along this East Coast. And 100%, especially the ones that are referred to as the middle colonies, which would be everything from about Maryland south, they're 100% going to be growing tobacco. And understand, they're growing tobacco. They're not getting a tobacco leaf and eating it at night around the dinner table. They're having to get food elsewhere. They're growing this tobacco, they're cultivating it, they're producing it, and they're sending it off. They're putting it on ships and sending it off back over to Europe, and they are selling it for a highly profitable price, okay? Huge success when it came to doing this tobacco. Now, very quickly, what we're going to see is that this trade network is going to emerge. And this trade network is going to be referred to as triangle trade, okay? Triangle trade. Now, what you see here is that basically they start trading goods straight up for other goods. Basically, goods that are indigenous to one part of the world are going to be traded to another part of the world for what they have. So let's look here. So from the New World, and of course, this is talking about the English colonies. This is talking about the Spanish settlements down here, what became known as the West Indies. They're taking raw materials. So sugar, molasses, wood, silk, rice, tobacco, whale oil, whatever. They're sending these raw materials over to Europe, okay? In Europe, they are taking those raw materials. So they take that lumber, let's say, and they make a chair out of it. That's what a manufactured good is where I take that cotton and I make it into a dress, or I take that tobacco and I make it into cigarettes, or like I cultivate it into pipe tobacco, let's say. Well, then I take those manufactured or luxury goods and either send them back to America or I send them down to Africa. Now, like we alluded to yesterday, because all this stuff is being produced and because those diseases were running through the Native Americans, there was an extreme high demand for workers, or more appropriately, slave labor in the Americas. So when these items were being traded into Africa, they were sending over, like it says here, gold, ivory, spices, hardwoods coming out of West Africa, going back up to Europe. And then, of course, what started to go from Africa across to the Americas is going to be slaves. Slaves will come this way. Now, this part of the triangle trade between Africa to the Americas is going to be called the Middle Passage. Okay, so if you see that word Middle Passage, that refers to that route that these slave traders took from Africa to the Americas. Okay, pardon me. Now, this is going to be, again, I'm sure you guys have probably heard of this stuff before, but it's going to be pretty rough. I mean, it's going to be a bad deal. And like I said, lots and lots and lots of these African slaves are going to lose their lives on this journey. Now, when it came to these slave traders, guys, understand the original slave traders were other Africans, okay? And what I mean by that is this. So let's say that my tribe doesn't like that tribe over there, okay? And so what my tribe will do is we'll go to war with that other tribe because we want their lands and we don't like them. So when we go to war with them, we capture the other group. Let's say we win the battle. We capture that other community. We don't want to have to take care of them. We don't want to have to put them in a prison somewhere. And so what we do is we sell them into slavery, and we take the money and we take their land. So that's going to be a lot of how this slavery is going to emerge at this point. And sorry to tell you, but slavery has been around since almost the beginning of time. In fact, slavery is still around today in a lot of parts of the world, which again is a pretty sad deal. So this was this passage that these slaves would come to America. Okay. Now what you see right here is a cross section of what these slave ships would look like. And when it came to these slave traders, okay, you got to kind of look at it with a different lens. And I know it's kind of a heartless thing to say and a really bad thing to say, but think about it. From a pure profitability standpoint, would you rather comfortably put 100 slaves on a ship, sell them across the Atlantic, which will take you about 3 or 4 months to sell across the Atlantic, and sell, and usually on that trip you might lose 5 or 6 slaves, people might die, sell about 95 slaves, or would you cram 300 slaves onto the same boat, sell them across, probably lose about 60 or 70 slaves on the journey, and then sell about 220, 230 slaves? Okay, well, from a purely profitable standpoint, you're going to want to cram as many slaves as you can on this boat, because that journey, remember, 3 or 4 months across the ocean, you've got to sell all the slaves, and then 3 or 4 months back to pick up more. Well, you're going to try and take as many as you can. And so, yes, these slave ships were like a horror show. They were terrible. People are going to be dying left and right. I mean, it's going to be a very, very crazy, very sad, very depressing environment. And yes, these people, when they are captured from their home and they're loaded up in these boats like this and they're sent out across the ocean, I mean, you're talking like extreme, like mental breakdowns that these people would have. And unfortunately, a lot of these people, they would die. They would rather kill themselves than be subjected to this. Now, imagine this, if you will. You're one of these slaves, okay? You are chained up. You are in chains, like handcuffs around your wrists. You also have what are called leg irons. So you have shackles around your ankles. Now, the shackles from your wrists are connected by a chain to the shackles around your ankles, and you also have a shackle around your neck. Okay, so everything is nice and tight, and the best you can do is shuffle your feet. Okay, well, when they take you into this boat, they lay you on these bunks, and you can kind of see this cross section. The bottom, the section down here is the bottom of the boat, and you can see these people laying, and they're pretty much laid down on their flat on their back on the hull of the boat. Now, when you lay down, there was a bar that would go across your chest, and a bar that would go across your legs, and you would be chained down to the ground. Now, the chains on your shackles are connected to about 4 or 5 other people that are next to you, and you're pretty much stuck there, okay? Now, I don't know about you guys, but at night, I got a big comfy bed. And when I lay in my big comfy bed, I usually got to roll this way and roll that way and get comfortable before I go to sleep. Imagine being stuck flat on your back, basically bolted down to the side of this boat, not being able to move. This was, again, a horror show, horrific conditions. Now, you were generally down here for about 23 hours a day. And trust me, there was no, excuse me, can I go to the bathroom? You just kind of went, okay? I mean, there's human waste all over the place because these people just went. There was no, excuse me, it's a little warm. Can you turn the air conditioner on? No, it was hot, humid, nasty down there. I'm a little hot. Can I please have some water? No, you're stuck down there, okay? You're in this environment, like I said, for about 23 hours a day. Now, for 1 hour of the day, they would do this thing they called the slave dances. And what they would do is they would pull out a section at a time, and you would go up onto the deck of the ship. Now, they called it the slave dances because up on top of the boat, they would have a guy beating on a drum, just boom, 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 boom. And what they would want you to do is they would want you to kind of shuffle, like I'm doing here, around the deck of that boat. The reason they're doing that is because you've been laying on your back for 23 hours. They want to get the blood flowing in your muscles. They want you to get moving. They want you to get your heart rate up. Because if you just lay there and do nothing, you're going to die. Your body's going to give out, your muscles are going to atrophy, and you're going to die. And while you're doing this little slave dance and running around this deck or shuffling around the deck, they've got these big barrels of like mush in it, like bread and rice and whatnot and beans, and you're grabbing handfuls of it and you're trying to eat as you're walking around on this deal. And they have these big barrels of water that you're trying to scoop out and drink water. So you're literally trying to drink water, eat food as much as you can while you're walking around this deck doing these slave dances. Then they take you back down, they bolt you back down, and you're stuck below deck for 23 more hours till the next day. Okay? Again, this was done to break people down, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, the whole thing, because this kind of breaks your spirit. And by the time you come to the Americas and they stand you up in front of a slave auction and they're inspecting your body and looking at you, I mean, your mind is going to be kind of broken down. It's going to be a very, and trust me, they would treat a lot of these guys like they were just a little bit more than livestock. Okay. I mean, again, a horrific time. And especially when we talk about like American history, I mean, this is a massive black eye on American history that we have this kind of thing. Now, not saying that America was evil and we're bad, because again, there's slavery everywhere. Okay. But the fact that this was a part of our history, I mean, people need to acknowledge that. People need to know that. Okay. It's a sad, sad thing. So, of course, this kind of shows this little exhibit in this museum kind of what some of these look like, these slave ships will look like. Of course, they're not chained up. You don't really see that. But in this, you can see them. You can see the cramped conditions. You can see on some of these mannequins, these exposed wounds. Because, yeah, if you didn't move fast enough or if you didn't comply, you would get whipped. You would get struck. And again, they're not, these bleeding wounds, they weren't going to be like, okay, let me treat that for you. Let me help you out. Let me bandage it up. No, you'd go back below decks and you'd be laying there with exposed wounds, getting infected, making it hurt more. Again, bad situation, really sad situation. Now, of course, very quickly, we will see an extremely extensive trade network is going to begin all around the world. And again, as you can see here, we've got this massive amount of trade coming into the Americas. You see this a massive amount of trade going around Africa out to Asia. We also see that, yeah, people are going to start venturing across that Pacific Ocean, sailing across to Asia that way as well. And people are crisscrossing all over the world as a result of this age of exploration, okay? Now, very quickly, let's see, we got enough time. We will start to see that this concept, and this is the last concept we're going to talk about, so I really want you to understand this because this is going to be big for later on. These countries are going to adopt a concept known as mercantilism, okay? Mercantilism. Now, what mercantilism basically means is this. I am the mother country. I am England, let's say, okay? You, all of you sitting in this room, are my colonies. Now, some of those colonies for England might be in the Americas. Some of those colonies might be in Africa. Some of those colonies might be in India, whatever. But guess what? I am the mother country, like you can see right here, mother country. All of you colonies, your role is to serve the mother country. So let's say that that Vincent here is a farmer and he's producing tobacco in his farm. Well, guess what? He's not producing tobacco to make him rich. He's producing tobacco to make me rich. So England and a lot of other countries are going to pass laws that basically say, okay, Vincent over here that is producing this tobacco, and again, I'm making a number up out of the top of my head, so just bear with me. He might be able to sell his tobacco for $100 a box of tobacco, making lots of money. And if he sells directly to other countries, he's making a killing. Well, England would come in and set a law that says you can only sell your tobacco to me, and I'm not going to spend $100 on it. I'm going to buy it for $50 a box. So I've cut his profits in half. Now you give that box to me, and then I'm going to turn around and sell that box for $200 a box because the demand is through the roof. Now I'm making $150 profit. He's making very, very little. Okay, so you kind of see this here. Gold and silver, foodstuff, raw materials by the colonies. The role of the colonies under mercantilism is to serve the mother country. Okay, this political cartoon does a great job of depicting this. Okay, now there's going to be some other concepts of mercantilism we'll talk about later on. We talk about the commercial revolution. We start talking about concepts of capitalism and free trade. But just know that this is going to start kind of originating at this time. And mercantilism kind of goes hand in hand with that triangle trade we talked about and all of that. Okay? All right. That's what we're going to hold off for today. I'm going to start the quiz here, the review in just a minute. I will let you know when it goes live. You guys can start taking it.